Hello and welcome to Martini's Eco and Country Bites today on Edge Radio Australia. Today we're going to be talking to some very knowledgeable, intelligent, wise individuals that are there already representing people around Australia, and they are concerned about the following issues that you're seeing here today, which is about the commitment to net zero, the impact on communities and ratepayers all around Australia. This is something that's really kicking off, and I think that especially after people uniting yesterday Australia-wide, that having councillors come out and share their personal views, that's something that I would like to share today. I would like to welcome to my segment, Martini's Eco and Country Bites, the following individuals. I would like to welcome Brenton Johansson, who is here from the city of Karratha. You're a councillor up there. How are you doing there today?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We have Anne Ryan, who is the Deputy Mayor from the city of Busselton. Thank you for joining us today, Anne.
Hi, Martine. Thank you for having me as well. It's beautiful here in Busselton, and I look forward to the chat.
We're certainly enjoying the warming up of this weather, that is for sure, down here in the southwest. Mark Watson is a councillor from the Port Stephens Council in New South Wales. So welcome, Mark. How are we? We've spoken before, but you're joining us again for a group chat.
Thanks, Martine. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, look, I think that this conversation, again, I think that everyone would like to share their personal views, and this is not necessarily representational of certainly the councils that you work and represent, but I think it's important that people do hear the wisdom and the insight from your perspectives. I'd first like to start with Anne Ryan, if I can. Anne, would you like to sort of introduce yourself a little bit more about how you came to be the Deputy Mayor at the City of Busselton and the things that are really concerning you about the commitment to net zero and the impact on your community down here in the southwest Western Australia? Sure.
Elected in 21 and elected as Deputy Mayor in 2023. My concern over this net zero issue really came to the fore when the community consultation started happening with the proposal of wind turbines in Geograph Bay. We are a male migration superhighway, and in fact, my mum's in the nursing home in Dunsborough, and my dearly beloved takes her out every Wednesday for fish and chips and a glass of wine, and they were well and truly watching the whales last Wednesday, so they're here already. And I have a significant amount of contact with the jetty CEO and staff, and bearing in mind that the Lewin Current comes right into Busselton and brings with it some amazing sea life. The proposal is to put in wind turbines in Geograph Bay, which will potentially, and this is arguable because there has been no research done. It's a bit like COVID shots, you know, take them and you will never get COVID. Well, we all know that's not true. But putting in wind turbines at the expense of the environment when we're supposed to be environmentalists is just outrageous. Where are the greens?
It goes against all the science.
It does, and when you consider, I just did a bit of research while we were talking. Argentina, Turkey, Brazil, Indonesia, Mexico, Russia, Philippines, Poland, USA, they've all pulled out of net zero. So what do they know that our government refuses to know or understand?
Yeah. And I think this comes down to leadership. I think you've nailed that one. What is it that they've got that we don't?
I think it is leadership, but also, you know, on behalf of ratepayers, the council majority opted into the Walga power purchasing agreement. Now, when I asked what $260,000 over and above the normal power bill, what that gets us, I was told, Councillor Ryan, it gives us a certificate. I don't know about you, but that makes me feel all warm and fuzzy.
Yeah.
If that's all we get, we didn't sign up for that particular thing. We signed up for, I think, one third of the power being green. But even so, I didn't agree with it. I wouldn't vote for it. I think power is power is power. And I mentioned to somebody yesterday, one of the wineries down here has got a electric charging stations for all the electric vehicles that come down. But when you see what's generating it, there's a conduit to a diesel power machine. I mean, how ridiculous. Once again, it makes us feel warm and fuzzy.
Well, it's virtue signaling at its most toxic point, isn't it, really? Because what we're saying is that we're going to show that this is the appearance and this is what people should perceive it to be, when it's just a form of ideology and virtue signaling to the point where it's okay to destroy nature, destroy everything that's intrinsically beautiful. Habitat, mass areas of habitat is destroyed for the sake of saving the planet. Yeah, the science isn't there. I'm just going to quickly introduce the other two that I have joined us today, and we'll come back to this subject matter, certainly because it's very close to my heart and soul. Brenton, if you would like to sort of introduce yourself about how you came to be in the city of Karratha and some of the issues that you're already seeing regarding either net zero and what's going on with your community about reduction of carbon emissions and how that affects you maybe up there.
Yeah, like we spoke earlier today, my council seems to be sort of excluded from a lot of what down south's dealing with. There's been a bit of talk on council about possibly moving to electric vehicles, possibly in the future, but nothing direct at this stage. And a lot of the stuff we've got coming through, we went through down a path of putting solar panels on the sporting complex roof, but they justified that it did save the power cost in the end. But again, that was before my time. I think one of the things you're left with as a council, because I only got in 2 years ago, is you're left with a lot of decisions that are made before you that, as coming in as a new councillor, you don't even understand some of the decisions that have been made. And you're not aware of certain things. And like a small example, we recently had a building we own in town, a commercial building that we're looking at possibly selling. So we're going to do a business development case on this building. And through the process of doing this business development case, we realised that we leased 106 odd car parks behind this building for parking for to be used if we developed a hotel 7 years ago. The hotel never went ahead, but we've been still paying for these car parks on this lease for the last 7 years, costing ratepayers $34,000 a year. So, to some of the councillors that were there 8 years ago, why didn't you pull that up, sort of thing? Or like, how come you don't remember making the decision to, sign on to leasing these car parking spaces and for a hotel that we still never went ahead with?
So there is definitely a waste of taxpayers' dollars, but I want to definitely backtrack because what you're saying is that unlike other councils that were literally strong-armed into signing up to net zero carbon reduction emissions and basically signing on to power purchase agreements, that doesn't exist at all in your council. There is no carbon emission reductions that are set for you guys.
Not in the 2 years I've been there. I've had nothing come through that it's about carbon reduction. So it seems to be councils that want to push it.
It is something that Walga like to push through, but it doesn't mean just because Walga are up for it that councils have to be up for it.
That's where I guess it depends on your CEO and your administration too. If you've got one of those administrations, as I like to call it, that want to go down that path and, are definitely leaning that way, well, they get the warm and fuzzies when they do it, don't they? So
yes,
they sort of push the rest of the people that way.
So how appalling that it comes down to basically, your CEO impact? Is it your mayor also that it would also be having an impact on that?
No, full-on council decision. Officers can put a recommendation, but ultimately the council decides. And then, of course, staff will turn around and say, but the council voted for it.
And the mayor,
wow.
the mayor might literally put down the track sort of thing. At some point he discusses it, but from what I've seen, a lot of mayors are just puppets getting pulled along by the CEO and the executive staff that they've sat in there for a lot longer. You know, they know how they're running things. They know how they want to play the game. And they lead a lot of the mayors, I've noticed, down a path of where they want them to go.
So just for those not in West Australia, the West Australian Local Government Association is WOLGA. So Australia, it's ALGA, is that correct? Australian Local Government Association?
That's
ALGA?
That's the
National
head body, yeah, federal body. Yeah.
Okay. So kicking off from that, I have a gentleman who I've already spoken to previously about the impact of net zero on his community, and that was Mark Watson here from Port Stephens. Mark, would you like to introduce yourself and give us a bit of an idea of what you've already shared with us in our previous interview, but ongoing issues to do with carbon emissions targets and how you stepped back from that?
Yeah, no worries. So basically, what we came across was a document called the Emission Reduction Action Plan, and basically that was net zero policy disguised under this new name that they could just fly under the banner there. And as we found out, they had these plans there to meet these carbon neutrality plans by 2050. And basically the option was presented to council. If you don't meet these carbon neutrality plans, you're going to have to pay $500,000 a year to the boogeyman. Then from there, they presented, okay, well, let's go net zero. So we'll progressively, transition to a net zero economy by 2050. And then you won't have to pay these carbon credits until you get to 2050 because scope 3 emissions you can't reduce anyway. So you're still going to have to pay a fee to the boogeyman. So that pretty much sums it up. So from there, we basically managed to get the vote up across the council floor. And since then, it's been rescinded. However, the original motion's been deferred to allow us to sit at the table with the mayor and the staff and the opposition there and kind of work our way through it and come up with some solutions that kind of appeal to the broader community. But from there, a lot of questions were asked. I've had meetings with staff since and asked them a lot of questions about their priorities and, where this kind of emission reduction action plan kind of leads them to. There's a lot of things there, and it comes down to the mental shift, right? It comes down to a shifting of focus for the council. So right now we've been hit with a lot of rain and quite constant. Every 3 days, we're having some sort of heavy rain come through. So our roads are shot. They're pretty bad. So the council, want a few things done. They want our roads fixed, and they want the drains fixed, and they want their rate money spent well, and they want their rubbish picked up. So rates, roads, rubbish, and drains. That's what it's about, the 4 pillars.
What councils are created for.
Exactly. So, I put it to the staff there and said, okay, well, how much have we spent on solar panels? And they said, nearly $1 million. And so, okay, well, so for $1 million, how many road graders and pothole crews could we buy? How many trucks and machinery can we buy to fix our roads? Because that's what the community wants. Well, the solar panels surely could have waited a couple more years. And that's when they kind of went, yeah, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. But that's what this emission reduction action plan is, or the net zero policy. That's what it is. It ties them into a policy where they're going to choose to go for these kind of things, these feel good, warm and fuzzy projects, as Anne kind of pointed out there. So that's kind of where we're at in the fight of net zero as such with policy. We want some common sense approaches. We want the priorities to be right. The recent meeting, I just passed a motion there on open drains maintenance. So we have a 2-year backlog on maintenance for our open drains. and a 1.2 million shortfall in the budget each year annually. That's been estimated. I'm waiting for a report to come back. But we're more than happy to spend money on electric vehicle chargers, solar panels, batteries, when we can't even maintain drains, which are flooding the roads, and the roads are getting impacted, and the roads are severely damaged.
So that 2 million shortfall would need to be passed on another way to recoup that to either taxpayers, ratepayers and residents and people that come into the area. Is that how usually it's passed on, Mark?
Not quite. So the 1.2 million shortfall that I'm talking about for the maintenance is in their strategic asset management plan. So basically what it is that they have $1.2 million worth of work that needs to be done, and it's not budgeted for. So we need to turn around to the ratepayers and say, sorry, we can't fix the drains that are causing localised flooding because we're spending the money elsewhere.
Cost shifting.
Yeah.
Cost shifting. Exactly right.
Let's go back to the carbon credits. This is basically, carbon credits is essentially another word for taxing, right? So how is this $500,000 passed on either to the ratepayers or collected? Is this ALGA that's coming from, or the federal government, Mark?
That's a very good question. Who do you pay the $500,000 to?
Who is the boogeyman?
No one knows.
Mr.
All you need to know is that you're going to feel guilty because let off some extra emissions, and now you need to pay a tax. And look, the reality is we need to repair our roads. Our main roads are shot. And what happens when you repair roads? You got more trucks out there, you got more crews out there, you got more materials being used, you're creating more emissions. So we need to create emissions to fix our roads. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and this is where the insanity just goes too far, because basic ecology shows carbon is equated to the greening of the planet. If we look at the contrast between yourself, Mark, and what's going on with Brenton, Brenton is in the Pilbara, which is the northern area of Western Australia, north, not the northest area, but in the Pilbara, which is predominantly mining industries up there. So if in comparison, the Pilbara area and the city of Karratha has not signed up to net zero. Obviously, that wouldn't be a popular, virtue signalling to say that we need to reduce our carbons if you've got the likes of Woodside and other gas and oil up there. But then you've got.
It gets even more interesting.
What was that, Mark?
So we have inner city lobbyist groups as such that come out to our region. We had one come out a couple of weeks ago, and they're called Committee of the Hunter. And basically, they came forward to try to collect a membership fee from us to join up to them, which I think is really inappropriate. Basically, for the fact that I put them on the spot, and I asked them, I said, so you're telling me that you're going to be advocating for net zero across our region? And they blatantly said yes. I said to them, I said, okay, well, can you tell us what the budget or the project overspend was on Snowy Hydro 2.0? And they couldn't ask me. And I said, well, surely you must know, because your former employee was Malcolm Turnbull, and Turnbull Renewables are one of your main sponsors. So surely you can tell me. Couldn't tell me. $10 billion. Then I asked her about the Irana red zone, $5.5 billion. I asked her, how many coal-fired power stations can you build for $15.5 billion? Because that would fix all our electricity problems.
Yeah.
And these are the people that are out there advocating, and they say that they're advocating, and they're out there just like little snakes, working their way into the local councils and getting them to sign up. So it's all these surrounding councils that are signed up to these advocacy groups that are pushing net zero policy under people's skin, and a lot of people don't actually know about it.
Disgusting. Well, we know that there was an outing of a lobbyist group that met with Mr. Bowen's office, I think, right before the announcement of a whole bunch of green renewables a couple of days after. to put pressure on them, from what I believe, especially about Robbins Island down in Tasmania that got announced. Then, of course, over here in Western Australia, it was announced that they're moving forward. They're still in preliminary feasibility license. No, they are still very hesitant about going forward because it's all going to blow up in their faces, because there is no support for this, for destruction. In the Hunter area off your coast, your proponents have all withdrawn. Is that correct, Mark?
Not quite. Equinor, the main backer, has withdrawn. So the one that was going to be funding it, they've withdrawn. However, what is quite interesting is that straight away, Chris Bowen's come out and pretty much announced that there'll be research and development, exploration licenses available. So he's basically keeping the area alive. So the fight's far from over. Yes, the wind farm stopped for now, but the fight is far from over. And they were quite sneaky in the way that they've done it. And it's from what we've seen in the last few days, especially from posts that have gone up from Andy Evans from Ocean X, is it's quite evident that state and federal members knew about this a long time ago, and they've been preparing for what the next phase is, which tells me that the local mayor, she possibly also knew as well, because I had a motion that was shut down a few weeks ago that would have been asking for Chris Bowen to revoke the remainder of the zone that wasn't required, and that was shut down by Labor.
I think you've nailed something there, is that there's this lack of transparency and accountability back to local councils. And Ryan was one of the individuals that helped speak out on behalf of the city of Busselton, the absolute opposition to the offshore wind turbine zone here in Geograph Bay, along with Mandurah. I want to quickly go back to when you're talking about a stitch-up. R&D. So these areas have been announced, and this is why I said this is going to be a long haul, because it's not just about offshore wind now. And this is what we said from the beginning, is that the R&D that's been in place, certainly with the University of Western Australia, who's going to be doing the marine surveying out here, they've been given millions upon millions of dollars in grants from the ACR, I think it's called, ARC, the Australian... my brain is just
Research Council.
Yeah, Research Council, who are more about education and stuff, but it's also about promoting new industry. Well, it's interesting that the University of Western Australia, who's taken all of these millions and millions of dollars from this federal funding through the federal government, are now going to be the ones out there doing the marine surveying, when they're doing R&D, research and development, for not only offshore wind, but for other energy sources under this green umbrella garbage that's going to be perhaps put in zone 2 further out in the ocean. And this is where I say stitch up. No, I think it's called collusion. I think we can clearly see here that the funding that's been set up with all of these agencies and organisations, people put in place in councils, people put in strategic positions, is all starting to match up, that there is a total stitch up for the Australian people, that to fight back and have a voice was going to be very, very difficult, because it had all been put in place before any of this was even announced. There was never, ever going to be consultation. And what would you like to say on maybe the back of that, how you feel about that personally?
There's so much to say. I feel that our children, I was listening to a podcast yesterday, our children and people in general are depressed because of so-called climate change. It's fed to us every night on the comedy hour, I call it, at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's ingrained in us at school that we're supposed to save the planet. It's one thing for an industry to be subsidised, and then at the other end, during an election, people to be given sweeteners to say, well, we'll pay for your power bills because you can't afford it. Why do we have a coal industry just up the road here in Collie that they're shipping in coal from the Hunter to keep the mine operating. There's plenty of coal in the ground. Why do we have now industries that were decimated a number of years ago, timber industries like Pemberton and Manjimup, that were then told to recreate themselves as tourism towns? And those towns now are decimated, yet Collie is going to be the next tourism town. And I won't say anything derogatory about that. Collie's a nice place, but I can't imagine it as a tourism town. I really can't. And so what is it that the general public can't see about, and $650 million given to overseas companies for the sake of investing in Australia's wind turbines, but is it 50 million solar panels they're going to build across the Nullarbor to create this new village and put in wind turbines over there. It's crazy. Can people not see that we must be living in a joke? It's dystopian what's going on. And they're paying for it.
When I was in Perth recently, I was absolutely horrified by the propaganda and the guilt tripping that was on all day long on the radio. And I was utterly horrified because it's all that, it's like, we've got to do this future generations, and we've got to do it. It's like, we're actually causing more destruction. Future generations are going to be in a worse situation than we are now, actually, because what's going to happen is that with the decline of habitat and biodiversity loss, there is an intrinsic value that's lost that can never ever come back. Certainly with the reef system that we've got out there in Geograph Bay. So this ideology's got to stop. And talking about future generations and families, homelessness or not enough housing is one of the issues that people are screaming out for, that this government doesn't seem to want to throw any money at. Brenton, would you like to sort of come in here and talk about what's going on? Because I know that Karratha has been a place that has really suffered on and off with issues to do with housing, not just for everyday people, but for people who are working up there on mines that want to live up there too. Would you like to sort of discuss what's going on there with the situation with that?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. We do go through the troughs of the mining cycles in Karratha, where we have the boom and bust cycles. But something you mentioned on making Collie a tourism town earlier, our council's currently doing a lot of feasibility studies and consultant work on turning Karratha into a tourism town so it can survive the next mining downturn. And at the same time, our council is investing a lot of money in building housing in town locally. And I guess we're pretty lucky. We come from a really rich council, I guess. Like, looking back over the last 10 years, the lowest we got to is about 96 million in reserve funds, and we're currently sitting on 147 million in reserve funds. So we've got a lot of money to play with, but it's being spent on things that I think shouldn't be the responsibility of the council. When you look at recently, back in June, we just elected or voted, they passed through voting 26 million to build 37 townhouses, ratepayers funds. It was projected to put us into a $17 million deficit in 27 or 2627 year or 2728. So they're projecting budgets, but they were confident that they'll find the funds from other areas, or it'll be made up, like there'll be no real issue. But the big thing with this project was 80% of the 37 townhouses, the 1, 2 or 3 bedders, majority of the 2 and 3s, 80% of them, they're projecting that the state government is going to rent them off of us. Now it's like, state government, build your own houses for your teachers and your police and your nurses and stuff. Why is it on the everyday mum and dads to be building housing to support your staff when you quote that you've got $1 billion surpluses at the end of the year? How about you take your own responsibilities and look after your own things? When did it become every mum and dad's responsibility to carry the state.
Yeah, absolutely. Where did it become everyone's responsibility to pay for corporations that have no business in being in our backyards, as our local mayor likes to let us be called NIMBYs? Yeah, so he thought that was great that Andy Evans called us that, and he agreed, which is horrendous. This name calling is
Martine,
whatever and derogatory calls.
Martine, can I ask Mark a question, please? I was interested to hear
Yeah,
about his
absolutely.
council putting in electric power stations for the electric cars. Why did the council feel the need to do that when, on a similar level, if I've got a petrol or a diesel car, I go to an independently owned fuel station to fuel up? Why do councils feel the need that it's their job to be putting in these electric power stations, whatever they're called, for the masses?
Magic question. I suppose that comes down to those warm and fuzzy feelings that you're talking about. Makes them feel good. But basically, my understanding is there from speaking to the staff there is that basically under the emission reduction action plan that they have, which is net zero policy in disguise, is there's provisions in there for them to upgrade the fleet to electric vehicles. Now, this is based off whether it suits a purpose. So some vehicles obviously can't be upgraded to electric vehicles and some can. And some instances, they tell me that it's practicable for certain vehicles from point A to point B. It works for them. But basically, what they're doing is they're installing electric vehicle power charging points so they can move vehicles from point A to point B.
But surely, if you've got a petrol or a diesel car, your council workers need to go to a petrol station to fill up. Surely, if you're changing over to electric vehicles, you still need to go somewhere else. And surely your net zero emissions would be lower if you didn't put them in anyway.
Yeah. So look, probably the easiest way to explain this would be I'll go back to what Brenton was saying earlier. First term on council, and you come into council and you inherit all these policies that have kind of, festered over the previous term, and now they're coming to fruition. And I do believe it was one of the first policies that kind of came across us in the new term. I think it might have been about the second or third meeting, and by that stage I was still finding my feet. And I do remember the policy coming across. I didn't really get to read it too well, but I just had this feeling that this is not good. This is not good. But now, fast forward 12 months, I'm certainly in a position to read those policies and actually stand up and see the truth behind them and try to make some sort of change. It is something that I probably would want to look at moving forward in the future, because if council is going to be outlaying tens of thousands of dollars per unit to put in a charging station, that is it going to have some sort of return? Is it going to be we've got what we call smart parking over here? I don't know whether you have it over there. That generates a lot of income for council. Are we going to generate an income from electric vehicles? Well, we should, if we're installing.
Well, that should have been outlined, shouldn't it? Don't the ratepayers and the people that are paying for this out of their rates, this should be outlined what the outcome would be, correct?
Yeah, you would hope so.
So maybe it's just these lovely lobbyists that have come in to previous councillors that have done their good strong arming here and saying it's all about the transition to green renewables, and that's what it's been about. This transition.
Yes.
It's like transition to ruin is what I say. But I think that looking at the contrast of the issues that are going on here, I think that this is coming back to there needs to be more accountability for the way that funds are obviously being spent. I mean, you guys are outlining that. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, like, you use the word transition, and the word that for me, it ties into that is grants. And that gets thrown around a lot. So they're like, oh, the state government's giving us a grant. So, okay, well, where's that money coming from? The taxpayers are paid for it somewhere. Or the federal government is giving the state government a grant that can give the council a grant. It's like, okay, so we've had to pay tax on it twice now, and then it finally comes through to council. Now, I remember the first briefing, so the first month that I had in council, and they made mention, oh, it's okay, grants are going to pay for it. And I said, okay, well, where'd the grant come from? And they tried to use the expression that it's free money. I said, I'll stop you right there. Don't ever say that in front of me again, because it is not free money. Our taxes are paid for it, and now we're paying for it again. So spend the money responsibly.
Yeah, certainly not Elbow or Bowen that's reaching into their pockets to hand out this funding, is it? Because they're saying it's all free energy, it's all free this. It's like, no, it's not. It's costing Australians billions and billions of dollars.
Well, the best thing is that your hard-working Aussies that break a sweat every single day know that nothing is free.
Yeah, really. Free. Well, this concept. I want to just quickly go back to the fact that up in Karratha, tax ratepayers' money is being used to build accommodation or housing for state employees, which should have been done by the state government. So here's a total stitch up. So you're forced to pay rates, because if you don't, then there's all kinds of things that they put on you if you can't afford it. But of course, you know, there's probably a fairly good income going on up there in the Pilbara. That's a generalization. I know there's probably people that are desperately hurting up there too. Absolutely, without a doubt. But this is the problem where there has been no accountability or discussions. I'm really grateful to have all of you come in and be so open and honest about these issues, because without putting this picture together and seeing the absolute lack of accountability from the federal and state government at the way that they're putting pressures on local council, and then the local council feels like it's forced to put that pressure back on community, or it's been implemented previously and now you're dealing with the ramifications of real poor decisions made by previous people that were part of the council. Where do you go from here? Maybe we can start with Anne and then go to Brenton and Mark, and just a bit of a, where do you see it go from here? What needs to change? What needs to happen here to stop this insanity?
Get some great councillors elected to council. That's what Brenton was saying before. If you
over here in WA,
if the community continues to be apathetic, you get what you deserve. And it's unfortunate that there were on our council some like-minded councillors, so we were having some wins, and then one of them left recently, and so we're down to 8. Generally, the mayor uses his casting vote for anything against Dan Ryan, and that's sad because, you know, the community loses. So it's disappointing, but I live in hope that after the 18th of October, we'll have some new people with fresh ideas who see that net zero is not the greatest. Hey, I'm a real believer in that we are potentially ruining our planet, but certainly not by net zero. We are spraying glyphosate like there's no tomorrow. I was watching a lady down the end of the street spray it with no shoes on yesterday, no mask, no nothing.
Oh,
Parkinson's, here we come. You know, we're spraying it in the river without any regard to what that's doing to the river's future anyway, but without any regard, we're ingesting it. I don't believe there's a child on the planet now that is not being born with either glyphosate or PFAS in their system. So we're slowly. maybe. Vietnam's given away glyphosate as well now, I believe. So there are things we're doing, you know, the plastics and things like that. We can do better, and we are doing better. Humanity has some wicked ways and some brilliant ways, and in the end, good will win over evil.
I think you nailed something there, Anne, where you say we do know better. We know that we need to do better. And this government, I keep saying that, is wanting to take us back into like the dark ages where we're uneducated or we don't know the most basic information about science and do our own research to know that the way to repair this planet, to look after it, to be better stewards, is not by causing environmental damage for the sake of foreign corporations are going to be making profit, massive profit, off hardworking Aussies' backs. Thank you, Anne. Mark, how do you see things moving forward is going to improve things from your perspective there?
Yeah, look, we're quite gifted in the fact that we've got a semi-balanced kind of council, half Labor and the other half independent and the Liberal. But I think what's going to bring change is robust debate and also a bit of diversity in the councillors that are elected. And Anne's quite right. We need people on councils around the country that kind of bring a bit of balance, bring a bit of variety. And that's how we're going to make change. If it's all stacked to one side, it's just going to end up with the same result every time. They're just going to toe the party line, aren't they? So we need a bit of variety in the local councils, and we just need good people standing up and making those changes and doing what's right by the community. This has been fantastic. I'm glad I got on council to go out there and talk to so many people in the community and advocate for them and try to make change and uncover all these little things that a lot of people, they don't have the time of day to kind of follow this stuff. So when I kind of put it out there, they kind of really appreciate the time and effort that's gone into kind of educating them on some of the things that are happening. At the same time, we're going to beating it over the roads.
Look, all I can say is that I've heard great things about you, hence why I asked you to come on and do the interview previously. When do your next elections come up for local council? I know you had one this year. Is it 3 years' time?
We had one last year, so September, that's 1 year anniversary, so we're going to have 3 years to go. So we're in for the long haul here, and I think the training wheels are off, so safe to say. So it's full steam ahead here for the next 3 years.
Well, keep up the good fight there, Mark. I know that you're speaking out and speaking strong for so many electors that are really concerned about the impact that what's been happening with offshore wind, but certainly all the other things that are sort of the nuts and bolts of what councils were designed to be, which is looking after, your roads, your rubbish, your 3 R's there. Thank you so much. And Brenton, where do you see things really need to change on a council level or in your community? And certainly, you guys haven't signed up to net zero, so this is a very different perspective for everyone to have insight to.
Yeah, haven't signed up to net zero, I guess, but we signed up to every consultant and feasibility study and study network group in the country. It seems like, or is it just my council that needs to document things 3 times to be able to go ahead and do something? Makes me wonder what we're actually here for as councillors. To be honest, when so much of it is so scripted that a lot of them walk in, sit at the table at the night and just nod their heads. Like, if you're told to do this, they follow. So I think this council election is going to be interesting. Hopefully we get some more like-minded people in there. I think it's important to vote for people that aren't worried to say something too. You get a lot of people that are worried about their conflicts. You've got half of our table works, or their husbands work for the mining companies. So a lot of the time they're concerned about what they say or do because they're worried about their husband's or partner's reputation at the company they work for, which it's just this silencing of opinions and, people willing to speak out on certain things. And, I'd say, over to you, Mark, over there and over the East Coast, be careful because, you'll eventually get something slapped on you like I did in December where the mayor put through a alternate motion to prevent councillors from ever raising anything again relating to state or federal politics. So basically just gagged us from ever advocating for the community on matters outside local government. unless it's on our strategic community plan, you know, or our advocacy policies, the ones we've already scripted years ahead. It
Wow.
just, yeah.
That's disgraceful. So putting a gag order on councillors, not only yourself, but in the future, that if they disagree with anything to do with state and federal politics, that you're going to be reprimanded.
Well, we just can't even put a motion in on it. So basically, unless it's already on something that we've sat around the table and discussed about, like housing, that we want to, you know, advocate for more housing in our community. If the community comes to us, like one member recently did regarding the needle syringe program that they hand out at the hospitals, where they give druggies like needles willy-nilly, you know, and throw them bags of, you know, lollies when they come into the hospital. We had a community member come in and ask us what we could do at a council level, and I said, not much really, you know, it's a state government responsibility and program. She found out that up in Broome they changed it to a needle exchange program where they had to bring in, you know, a used needle to get another needle style thing, and it slowed it down a little bit up there. And so I anyway went down the path just last month of putting in this motion just to see if it would sort of slip through, and because I knew the amount of mums and dads that were sort of concerned. We've had 3 kids prick themselves with one of these needles in the playgrounds, you know, in the last 6 months. So I sort of thought I'll put this in because it'd be interesting. Like, this is a state government issue, but for the mayor or, you know, whoever else to say around the table, no, we're not going to let that through. Like, the controversy would have been huge. So I put it through, and it was funny. Like, they just all sat there nodding their heads because they didn't want to, you know, upset the loud vocal majority at the time of all these parents. And they sort of, all agreed with it and, you know, voted it through, seconded it, and all voted yes. So when it come time to speak, I sort of referenced back to, and I brought up the December motion last year and said, you actually gagged us from ever raising, you know, state or federal politic issues again, which in a sense, what you put in back then should have stopped this motion proceeding tonight. But you've allowed it through because, you know, the blowback on you would have been huge if you'd stopped people's concerns on this issue. So it's the hypocrisy.
I think
Is just
this is a slippery slope to communism too. When people are being silenced about having a voice in the community, and if you disagree with a narrative or an agenda from state and federal government, then what you're saying essentially is you cannot have a juxtaposed opinion, science, data, or anything else that may prove what the narrative that is wrong. And to say that people don't have the right in this, and a supposedly democratic nation here, is appalling to know that that's happening on a council level. Well, I think we could certainly do part 3, 4, and 5 of this. We could be a little mini series. Apart from the fact that you're probably going to have a huge order come through for your hats there, Brenton.
Oh, they sold out online. I put a post up on Saturday when we were driving down from Karratha to Perth for the rally down there, and I put a picture of the hat on the dash. And by the time we made it to Perth, 13 hours odd later, there was 1,000 reactions on the post and people sending me messages saying, where can I get the hats from? And I was sending the links through to people because I found them online. And then they're sending the messages back saying, oh, no, they've already sold out now. So I think the supply will probably get a few more in at this point.
Well, I hate to cut it here, but we're kind of out of time because I think that this could keep going on for quite some time, because the things that have been disclosed today are a great talking point for community to go back and come back to their councils and say, I'm not liking what I'm seeing. Certainly the fact that it's 50 years since the Labor government were ousted by the Australian people. I think we're having an anniversary celebration coming up is what I think. I think it's time to let Mr. Albanese and this federal government know that they're failing this nation dismally. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today on Martini's Eco Country Bites on Edge Radio Australia. It's very, very much appreciated.
Thank you all. See you later.
Thanks, Martine.
Thanks for having us.
I'll chat again soon. Thank you.